Well, to start off, we'll let you know a little bit about it.
You want to know what I'm seeing?
Welcome to RetroWare TV. Whether it be Hironobu Sakaguchi, Yu Suzuki, Tomonobu Itagaki, Yuji Horii, or Shigeru Miyamoto, video game players the world over anticipate the newest offerings from the masters of video game direction and writing. Over the last 15 years, one predominant talent in the art of game creation has arguably captured the imagination of gamers while evolving the craft and style of games more so than any other individual. That man is Hideo Kojima. With the release of Metal Gear Solid for the PlayStation in 1998, Kojima and the Metal Gear series that launched his career in the 1980s quickly became the gold standard for creativity and cinematic storytelling in modern video gaming. With a flair for melodrama and the intelligent incorporation of political and pop science themes, Hideo Kojima has aptly fabricated fictional environments and characters that summarily envelop gamers, creating a bankable formula for his own Kojima Productions Group and its partner publisher Konami. Of all the creative talent that Kojima has brought to the gaming industry, his original love and goal was to be a filmmaker, a dream that many game creators had sought prior to landing in an industry that would one day surpass movies as the primary art form of the masses. In 1988 with Snatcher, Hideo Kojima used video games as a medium to deliver a linear narrative while building upon point-and-click adventure game logic for the purpose of fashioning a memorable cyberpunk tale. With its release on the Sega CD, English-speaking audiences were able to enjoy this title, one of Kojima's first and most revered games. On July 29, 1994, Kojima refined the cinematic stylings of Snatcher by releasing another anime-inspired digital comic book. In Japan only, Konami published Policenauts for the popular NEC PC9821 computer. From the release of Policenauts' first trailer, gamers knew they were in store for what was boasted as the next generation of Snatcher. With full-motion anime sequences and revolutionary CGI animations, Kojima crafted something that looked more like a film than a video game. Japanese television commercials for the PlayStation and Sega Saturn amplified this theme as the drama surrounding the characters and the plot were given the spotlight over the gameplay features. Even one Saturn ad used an opening background image quite similar to the thematic teasers used in 2009 to create interest in Kojima's newest Metal Gear Solid announcement. Policenauts is exemplified by its classic detective storyline, framed by unique and grandiose themes that challenge mankind's preconceived notions of manifest destiny by questioning our limitations as a people yearning to extend into the final frontier. The questions raised by Policenauts are large and thought-provoking. Are human beings capable of extended space travel and space colonization in a biological, psychological, and moral context? How do these limitations affect our exploratory nature? How will these limitations breed new evils and new corruptions? With mankind celebrating the 40th anniversary of walking on the moon and the future of space travel evolving from shuttles and rovers to Mars and space stations, the questions posed by Hideo Kojima's narrative are more relevant than ever before. with the inspired work of Mark Laidlaw, Artemio Urbina, Michael Sawyer, and the entire Policenauts translation project at policenauts.net. As of August 23, 2009, Hideo Kojima's 46th birthday, the full English translation patch for the PlayStation was released to the masses. For weeks prior to the release, RetroWare TV was invited to be part of the exclusive beta testing team. Sworn to secrecy, we went to work playing the game, searching for bugs, and experiencing the grandeur of this story. For 15 years, I can say that this game has been the singular gaming holy grail I've waited to experience. And I can say without a doubt that when I completed this game during its early beta stage, it was official. Policenauts was not only everything I had hoped for, but it had surpassed Snatcher in the realm of storyline and presentation. Policenauts is a remarkable game. It holds up with some of the greatest science fiction narratives. The basic plot revolves around the protagonist, Jonathan Ingram, one of the original 5 Policenauts, police-trained astronauts, who had all been integral players in mankind's completion of the first fully realized space colony, named Beyond Coast. During a routine spacewalk and testing of a new EVA spacesuit called the Yuri EMPS prototype, a malfunction sends Jonathan out into space as his 4 counterparts have no choice but to look on. With quick thinking, Ingram is able to activate the cold sleep device in the survival ball attached to his suit, preserving him in a state of suspended animation until he is discovered 25 years later, in the year 2038. It has now been almost 3 years, and Jonathan Ingram has settled in as a private detective in what is now Old Los Angeles. Focusing his efforts on a recent surge of missing children, Jonathan Ingram is visited by his estranged wife. Having not seen her since his disappearance 28 years earlier, she arrives looking to hire him to find her missing husband, Kenzo Hojo. Jonathan, torn by the shock of seeing his lost love all these years later, along with the events about to play out that lead to her sudden death, Jonathan chooses to take on the investigation on the now fully realized and fully populated Beyond Coast space colony. After the tragedy 28 years earlier and having spent the last 3 years on Earth, also known simply as home, Jonathan Ingram heads back out to space to piece together the mystery of Kenzo Hojo's disappearance and the murder of his ex-wife, with the only pieces of evidence being a set of capsules, a broken leaf, and the word Play-Doh. Jonathan sets off on his investigation. As Kojima incorporated the influences of Blade Runner, Akira, and Terminator in the creation of Snatcher, he chose a somewhat unorthodox thematic counterpart to help deliver the story of Policenauts. Once Jonathan arrives on Beyond, he meets up with one of his old LAPD partners and fellow Policenaut, Ed Brown, now relegated to a desk in the Beyond Coast Police Vice Unit. Together they make up a Riggs and Murtaugh in space. The buddy cop movie vibe plays heavy in their relationship, and when matched with some of the soundtrack's jazzier segues, the game has a Lethal Weapon kind of feel. But in general, the game only pays homage to the film series, as the game's serious theme and intricate corporate intrigue involving the omnipresent Tokugawa Group and its involvement with all aspects of Beyond Coast only exemplifies Policenauts' complex motif. Much of the production staff on Policenauts carried over from the production of Snatcher, including character design by Tomiharu Kinoshita, with mech designs by Hajime Katoki, known for his work on Gundam 0083. The heavy anime stylings of Policenauts was accomplished by multiple names in the animation business in Japan, including AIC, a prolific anime production company that is responsible for work in the titles like Vampire Princess Miyu, Tenchi Muyo, Bubblegum Crisis, and even some animation assistance in the 1980s Inspector Gadget series. Even some script work was done by Mitsuo Matsuki, who worked the previous year on New Dominion Tank Police, and animation director Akio Kawamura, who had directed on multiple anime projects such as episodes of Bleach and Full Metal Panic. The soundtrack was composed by Motoaki Furukawa and Tappy Iwase of Konami's in-house music group Kukiya Club, as well as Ika-chan Masahiro Ikariko, who also contributed to Kojima's Snatcher game. Furukawa has worked on various Konami games, including the original Metal Gear, Super Contra, as well as Sunset Riders. Kojima, being such a fan of the music of the game, including the game's recognizable opening musical cue, decided to use that memorable riff in the opening logo sequence for the release of the first Metal Gear Solid game. The Policenauts soundtrack has been released on multiple compilations, including the original soundtrack for the PC-98 release, featuring the 38 tracks from that version of the game. Policenauts FN contains arranged versions of certain tracks by Motoaki Furukawa and Koichi Namiki. The MIDI version included the MIDI arranged music as well as a floppy disk containing original MIDI versions of some of the tracks. The last released version was a Hideo Kojima black disc of both music selections from Snatcher as well as Policenauts. As for the releases of the game Policenauts itself, the first system to receive the game was the Japanese-only NEC PC-9821 on July 29, 1994. A CD-ROM and floppy disk were included as the system rendered all cinematic cutscenes in real time. In April of 1995, the Policenauts pilot disc was released for the 3DO, which included a demo of the game, making of featurettes, as well as some game backstory and other development information. This helped to promote the eventual 3DO release on September 29, 1995. A version with just the game was released as well as a special set that included a pack-in 3DO mouse peripheral as well as a Policenauts branded mousepad. The 3DO varied greatly from the original PC-98 version, as all animated cutscenes were rendered in 24 frames per second quality, and the beautiful 3D CG animated scenes were also added. The PlayStation version was released on January 19, 1996. The elements that made up the 3DO version were kept, except some corrections and modifications were made to the cinema's 3D elements, as well as some redrawn graphics and compression changes to lessen the pixelated look of the 3DO version. The PlayStation mouse was also usable for this release and is highly recommended. The Sega Saturn was the last console to receive the game on September 13, 1996. The Saturn version allowed for use of a mouse as well as the Saturn Virtua Gun for the shooting segments. The game was released as a special edition, along with the game-only release. Some of the featurettes and content from the 3DO pilot disc are actually hidden within the Saturn version of the game. A few weeks after the initial PlayStation release, Konami released the Policenauts Private Collection, which incorporated some of the content from the pilot disc. This content included making-of sequences, behind-the-scenes look at the CG animation, interviews, as well as a look at all of the voice actors. The Private Collection was released a full 6 years prior to Kojima's comparable The Document of Metal Gear Solid 2. The PlayStation also received the Best Series version of the game, as well as the PS1 Books Series edition, to help promote the newly designed PS1 and the LCD monitor add-on feature. The final release of this game was on the PlayStation Store in Japan in 2008, making it downloadable for the PS3 as well as the PSP. In spring 1996, Sega announced the release of Policenauts for the North American Sega Saturn. An artistic mock-up of the cover art was also released as part of a promotional pack-in that came with certain video game releases, as well as video game store flyers. The North American version of the game, however, was never released or even created, as Hideo Kojima later indicated that programmers had difficulty matching the newly translated English-synced dialogue to the full-motion video cutscenes. It is unclear how far along the newly translated voice acting had gone, but it would seem doubtful that Konami could match the 21 voice actors used in the original Japanese production. Thanks to the translated patch now available, anyone who has a copy of the PlayStation game has the ability to rip the ISO image file, apply the patch, and reburn the game. They can now play it on a modded PlayStation 1 or on the ePSXE emulator for the PC. RetroWare TV recommends using Taiyo Yuden or verbatim brand CDRs and burning at no faster than 3 times speed. This will ensure the deepest ink impression to allow the somewhat finicky PlayStation laser to read the game properly. For more instruction, please head over to policenauts.net or even search YouTube for how-to videos in order to help you with the patching process. Please stay tuned to RetrowareTV.com as we continue to venture in depth into Policenauts' story, gameplay, and the translation project that has allowed Kojima's classic to be played by an even larger audience than ever before. This multi-part retrospective will build more on the game's themes, influence, and legacy as we delve further into Policenauts, a video game odyssey.